You know the sound a main server cluster makes right before it fails? It is not a sudden alarm or a digital beep. It is a subtle shift in the vibration of the cooling fans, a breathless, desperate wheeze, much like a marathon runner on the verge of collapsing. I know that sound better than I know the sound of my own voice. I have been listening to it for 14 years. 14 years of sitting in a windowless server room that perpetually smells of ozone and stale coffee, keeping the digital heart of Apex Logistics beating while the executives upstairs play golf and talk about paradigm shifts. I am Oscar. I am the person you call when your database completely stops responding, when the routing algorithm crashes, or when the CEO, let us call him Nelson, accidentally downloads a ransomware payload because he clicked a link promising him a free luxury vacation. I am the fixer. I am the janitor of the network, and for over a decade, I was the only thing standing between this company and total unmitigated obsolescence. It all started in a cramped, unheated garage. It is a classic cliché, I know. Nelson, myself, and two other engineers who cashed out 7 years ago to start a brewery in Colorado. Back then it was thrilling. We were pioneers. We were building something real. I wrote the foundational code for our proprietary logistics platform, internally named the Apex Protocol, on a second-hand laptop that was missing the spacebar. I slept under a makeshift desk, wrapped in a sleeping bag that smelled like cheap pizza and ambition. I bled for this place. Quite literally. I once sliced my arm open on an exposed server rack during a severe thunderstorm trying to reroute power before the backup batteries failed, and I simply wrapped it in athletic tape and kept typing. Fast forward to last Tuesday. I am 48 years old. I have chronic lower back pain that flares up whenever the humidity rises, and I am sitting in a quarterly town hall meeting listening to Nelson drone on about our record-breaking revenue. The room is filled with glass partitions, brushed steel accents, and people who look like they were manufactured in a catalog for modern corporate apparel. I am wearing a faded sweater that is older than the junior developer sitting next to me. Nelson is up there, flashing a perfectly whitened smile, talking about how we achieved the impossible. We landed the massive national retail contract. We optimized the freight throughput. I am looking around the room, and I realize he is taking a lot of credit for a man whose primary contribution to the company lately is deciding which brand of artisan spring water to stock in the executive break room. I was exhausted, not just physically tired, but soul-crushingly tired. The kind of fatigue where your bones feel like they are made of solid iron. I looked at the new crop of fresh hires. They were bright-eyed and eager. They possessed titles like Junior Optimization, Evangelist, and Customer Success Architect. They spent half the day recording social media videos in the lounge and the other half asking me how to reset their network credentials. And I sat there, bearing the title of Lead Systems Engineer, a title that came with absolutely zero equity and a comically inadequate infrastructure budget, thinking to myself that I built the very floor they were standing on. It was not merely the sheer volume of work, it was the profound invisibility. I had become a fixture in the office, much like a photocopier or a water cooler. I was the legacy guy. I actually heard one of the new marketing associates call me that in the elevator. He said to ask the legacy guy, because he knows where the bodies are buried. He chuckled at his own joke. I did not laugh. He had no idea that I did not just know where the bodies were buried. I was the one who dug the graves and planted the flowers on top to hide the evidence. That Tuesday meeting was the moment the foundation cracked. Nelson's announced a cost of living adjustment freeze for all senior technical staff. He called it tightening the belt. He spoke of lean operating principles. He said this while wearing a tailored suit that cost more than my first automobile. I looked down at my phone, seeing a notification from my bank. Auto payment for my mortgage. Balance remaining entirely too high. I felt a familiar twitch in my left eye. The exact same twitch I get when a critical hard drive corrupts. I looked back at Nelson, beaming with the unearned confidence of a man who just learned how to open his own email. I looked at the evangelists and architects nodding along in agreement, sipping their expensive iced coffees. And for the very first time in 14 years, the fierce loyalty that had been the structural steel of my entire adult life started to heavily rust. It was not a loud, dramatic moment. It was not a cinematic scene where I stood up and flipped a table. It was entirely quiet. It was the silence of a cooling fan, finally stopping. It was the sudden realization that I had spent the best years of my life building a cage, locking myself inside, and willingly handing the key to a man who could not configure a router if his life depended on it. I returned to my desk, a cluttered cubicle situated in the back corner, as far away as possible from the natural light reserved exclusively for the sales team, and I started meticulously reviewing the core code. My code, the Apex protocol. It was a sprawling, complex, incredibly dense masterpiece of logic gates and interdependent functions. I knew every single line by heart. I knew that if anyone accidentally deleted a specific block of code in the shipping manifest module, the entire routing system would default to an endless loop. I touched the monitor screen and whispered that we were the only real things left in this building. But the corporate atmosphere was rapidly shifting. I could sense it. The office smelled like expensive cologne and impending betrayal. I simply did not know the sheer magnitude of the storm that was brewing. I stayed late that night, as I always did, patching a massive security vulnerability that the newly hired Rockstar developer had carelessly left wide open. If I had not caught it, we would have leaked thousands of client records by dawn. I saved the patch, committed the exact code, watched the green status lights flicker on my dashboard, and felt absolutely nothing. No pride, no relief, just a hollow, echoing void where my career used to reside. The fuse had been lit, and the explosion was imminent. The very next day, the universe decided to stop giving me subtle hints, and instead hit me squarely with a brick. It was around lunchtime. Usually I eat at my desk, consuming a sad rotation of turkey sandwiches and plain yogurt. However, the air conditioning unit in the server room was malfunctioning, which was bitterly ironic, considering I felt like an overheating processor half the time, and the relentless noise was driving me insane. So, I relocated to the communal break room. The break room at Apex Logistics was designed to resemble a trendy startup incubator, but it felt much more like a purgatorial waiting area. There were brightly colored beanbag chairs that nobody ever used because they were impossible to escape without looking incredibly foolish, and an expensive foosball table that merely gathered dust. I sat quietly at one of the high-top tables, nursing a lukewarm, bitter coffee. 2 tables over, a couple of the fresh new hires were huddled closely around a sleek silver laptop. One was a young man named Justin, maybe 25 years old, who wore designer sneakers indoors and listed cryptocurrency enthusiast in his official email signature. The other was a young woman named Chloe, fresh out of a coding boot camp, genuinely sweet, but possessing roughly the same technical proficiency as a toaster oven. They were whispering loudly, displaying that distinct lack of volume control that young people exhibit when they believe they are being secretive but actually want the entire room to know they possess forbidden knowledge. Chloe's eyes went wide with astonishment as she spoke to Justin. She could not believe they had started him at such a high figure. Justin leaned back in his chair confidently, popping a mint into his mouth, and boasted that he had negotiated aggressively. He claimed he had competing offers from massive tech giants, which was likely a complete fabrication. He laughed arrogantly and spun his laptop around to show her the screen. I was absolutely not trying to snoop on their conversation, but my eyes have been trained for decades to spot anomalies in code. Scrolling at 1,000 lines a minute, a bright PDF document displayed on a massive 15-inch high-resolution display is practically a glowing billboard. It was an official offer letter. Apex Logistics, position, Junior Systems Architect. My eyes instantly locked onto the bolded number at the very bottom of the page. Base salary, $180,000. The entire world seemed to stop spinning for a brief second. The low hum of the refrigerator, the distant chatter of the sales team, the sound of traffic outside the window. All of it just muted into absolute silence. $180,000. I currently make $140,000. I have been bleeding for this company for 14 years. I single-handedly built the complex architecture that Justin was just hired to maintain. I manage the entire network infrastructure. I am on call every single day of the year. Justin regularly asks me which button turns on the conference room projector, and he was making $40,000 more than me. I felt a tremendous physical blow to my chest. It was not merely professional jealousy. It was profound humiliation. It was the exact mathematical quantification of precisely how little they respected me and valued my loyalty. To the executives, I was nothing more than a depreciating asset. Justin was the shiny new investment vehicle. I stood up abruptly. I did not finish my lukewarm coffee. I walked in a straight line directly to the elevator, my heart hammering a frantic, rhythmic beat against my ribs like a trapped animal desperate for escape. I told myself to remain calm, hoping there was a logical explanation, perhaps a misunderstanding regarding stock options. I marched straight into the Human Resources Department. The Human Resources Director is a woman named Brenda. Brenda is the exact type of person who utilizes the phrase human capital without a single hint of irony and aggressively decorates her corner office with framed inspirational quotes about grinding and hustling, all written in flowing gold cursive. She smiled when I walked in, flashing that tight, practiced, entirely artificial smile that never quite reaches her eyes. It was the facial equivalent of a system error message. She adjusted her expensive glasses and asked to what she owed the pleasure of my visit. I refused to sit down. I stated firmly that we needed to discuss my current compensation immediately. Her artificial smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, before perfectly resetting itself. She asked if this was regarding the recently announced salary freeze, reiterating what Nelson had explained during the town hall. I forcefully cut her off. My voice was surprisingly steady, despite the fact that my entire body felt like it was violently vibrating. I informed her that I had just inadvertently seen an official offer letter for a newly hired junior systems architect, a role that directly reports to me, and that this role pays $40,000 more than my salary after 14 years of dedicated service. The room went completely silent. The only sound was the air conditioning vent hissing above us. Brenda let out a long, dramatic sigh, sounding exactly like a frustrated parent dealing with an unreasonable child. She clasped her manicured hands tightly on her pristine desk. Brenda spoke with a voice dripping with condescending sweetness, telling me that I needed to understand how the current market operates. She claimed that technology salaries had rapidly exploded over the past few years, and to attract fresh talent, the company simply had to be competitive and pay current market rates. I snapped back, declaring that I am the market. I reminded her that I built the entire platform, and I know substantially more about the system than every single person in the building combined. I asked if she was genuinely telling me my market rate was less than a kid who still uses basic dictionary words for his administrative passwords. Brenda's eyes hardened significantly, and her pleasant mask completely slipped away. She coldly stated that internal equity and external acquisition are drawn from entirely different budgets. She informed me that I was on an existing compensation trajectory, while Justin was an acquisition, and that is simply how the modern industry works. I demanded that she fix it, that she adjust my trajectory and match his salary. I told her I was not asking for a miraculous windfall, just basic parity with the entry-level employee I was expected to train. She leaned back in her expensive leather chair, the material creaking under her weight. She looked at me with a gaze of pure, unadulterated dismissal. She stated flatly that they could not just randomly bump my salary by $40,000 outside of an official review cycle, especially not during a mandated freeze. She claimed it was strictly against company policy. I laughed a sharp, jagged laugh, reminding her that I personally wrote the policy on data retention and disaster recovery, and that she could easily rewrite a simple salary policy. She simply said no. Her voice was cold and undeniably final. Then she delivered the exact line that would violently echo in my head for the next 48 hours. The line that definitively signed the death warrant for Apex Logistics, even though she was completely oblivious to the fact. She casually shrugged her shoulders, picked up a pen, and looked down at her paperwork completely, dismissing my presence. She said that is the current market rate for new talent, and I can accept it or leave. She repeated it, accept it or leave. I stared at her, feeling a strange sensation wash over my entire body. The blinding rage evaporated, instantly replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. The absolute clarity I felt was intoxicating. It was like staring at a complex mathematical equation for hours and suddenly realizing the solution was incredibly simple all along. I looked at Brenda. I looked at the framed inspirational posters on her wall, and I spoke with a remarkably soft voice. I said, "Okay, I understand." I thanked her for perfectly clarifying my exact position within the company. I turned around, walked out of her office, and completely ignored her when she called my name in confusion. I returned to my desk, staring at my monitor. She told me to accept it or leave. I whispered to myself that the challenge was officially accepted. Most people believe that quitting a job after 14 years requires a dramatic exit, involving screaming matches and thrown paperwork. But when you are truly finished, when the final thread of mutual respect has been permanently severed, you do not scream, you simply vanish into thin air. I spent the remainder of the afternoon in a strange fugue state. I answered routine emails, I closed outstanding technical tickets, and I nodded politely at colleagues in the hallway. I was operating on pure autopilot, a basic background script executing a repetitive loop while my main processor was entirely focused on formatting the hard drive of my life. At 5:45 in the evening, the office had mostly emptied out. I did not pack a large cardboard box, as that always draws unwanted attention. Instead, I quietly opened my canvas backpack. I placed my personal external hard drive inside, containing my family photos and custom configuration scripts. I took my favorite chipped ceramic coffee mug. I left absolutely everything else behind. The performance awards, the employee recognition plaques from years past, the tangled mess of specialty cables. They were all artifacts of a corporate life that no longer belonged to me. I opened my email client one final time. I drafted a remarkably brief message directed to Brenda and Nelson. The subject line read "Resignation effective immediately." The body simply stated that I was resigning from my position at Apex Logistics, that all company assets remained at my desk, and my security badge was resting on my keyboard. There were absolutely no expressions of gratitude, no well wishes for the future. Just cold, hard, indisputable data. I clicked send, gently placed my badge on the keyboard, and walked straight to the elevator without ever looking back. The physical weight lifting off my shoulders was dizzying. The drive back to my modest suburban home was a complete blur. I did not turn on the radio. When I arrived, I poured myself a glass of cheap whiskey and stood in the dark kitchen. Panic began to slowly creep in. I was 48 years old with meager savings in an industry obsessed with youth. Had I just made a catastrophic error? I shook my head. No. I wandered into my spare bedroom, which served as a chaotic home office filled with old computer hardware. In the corner sat a heavy, dented metal filing cabinet from the early startup days. Something suddenly tugged at my memory. A desperate conversation from over a decade ago. A late night at a cheap diner with Nelson when the company was on the absolute brink of total bankruptcy. I had threatened to leave for a stable corporate job, and he had begged me to stay. I yanked the bottom drawer of the cabinet open. It groaned loudly in protest. Buried behind old tax returns was a thick blue binder labeled Apex Legal Documents. My hands were visibly shaking as I pulled it out and blew the thick layer of dust off the cover. Inside was the original founder's participation agreement. I flipped past the standard non-compete clauses and stopped abruptly at Section 8, which detailed intellectual property and residual rights. The legal jargon was dense, but I understand logic structures perfectly. As I read the specific clauses, my breath hitched. It stated that in the event of my separation from the company, barring termination for criminal cause, the company retained a limited, revocable license to utilize the core infrastructure architecture. Revocable. The license was entirely contingent upon my continued employment, or a massive buyout of the intellectual property rights. They had not hired me as a standard employee. They had legally codified me as a technology partner who owned the foundational code. Because they were entirely broke back then, they licensed it from me instead of buying it. And since I had just resigned voluntarily, the license was completely void. The Apex protocol, the software that processed nearly all of their revenue, no longer belonged to them. Under 17 United States Code Section 106, which grants exclusive rights in copyrighted works, any further use of my code without my explicit permission constituted severe copyright infringement. A cold, predatory smile spread across my face. I immediately grabbed my phone and called Harvey. Harvey was an old friend and a highly aggressive contract lawyer who harbored a deep hatred for corporate exploitation. I read him the exact text over the phone. He went silent for a moment before demanding I verify I held the original document. When I confirmed, he laughed out loud. He explained that this was a rare reversion clause. He confirmed that under 17 United States Code, Section 106, their continued use of the platform after my resignation was willful, undeniable copyright infringement. They could not even route a single package without my legally protected code. Harvey drove over to my house within the hour, bringing his laptop and a bottle of expensive scotch. We sat at my kitchen table until 3 in the morning, meticulously cross-referencing the legal agreement with the current system architecture. Every single API call passed directly through my copyrighted code. They had built a massive corporate empire on my foundation, completely forgetting I owned the concrete. We drafted a brutal, single-page cease and desist notice demanding the immediate cessation of all unlicensed use of my intellectual property. By 5 in the morning, we were ready. I wanted to deliver it personally. Harvey drove me to the office building just before the sun came up. The parking lot was completely empty. I used my security badge, which HR had foolishly failed to deactivate, and slipped inside the silent building. I walked up to the executive suite, entered Nelson's massive corner office, and placed the thick envelope directly in the center of his expensive leather chair. I wrote market rate in bold letters on the front. I walked out, got back into Harvey's car, and waited for the inevitable explosion. Harvey and I retreated to a classic diner down the street, sitting in a booth that provided a clear view of the Apex Logistics building. I ordered a massive plate of scrambled eggs and black coffee. It was shortly after 7 in the morning. My phone buzzed aggressively. It was a text message from Nelson. He demanded to know the meaning of the envelope on his chair. I did not reply. I took a slow sip of my coffee. 10 minutes later, he texted again, asking if this was some kind of elaborate joke. He had obviously read the cease and desist notice. By 8 in the morning, the situation was about to escalate from a legal dispute to a total operational catastrophe. I opened my laptop on the diner table and connected to the public-facing system status dashboard. I had hard-coded a specific dead man switch into the core architecture years ago. It required a manual authorization token that I generated every single month to renew the internal license keys. I had intentionally skipped the renewal. The automated system check was scheduled for exactly 8 in the morning. I watched the screen intently. At 2 minutes past 8, the dashboard flickered violently. The latency spiked massively. Inside the building, the master control server pinged the authentication database, found my authorization token missing, and immediately panicked. The system automatically reverted to trial mode, which rigidly restricted the platform to a mere 10 simultaneous connections. For a logistics company that handled thousands of active freight routes globally, this was an instant death sentence. My phone completely exploded with notifications. There was a frantic text from Justin, the highly paid junior architect, complaining that the system said the license was expired and asking me to fix it. There was a text from Brenda demanding an immediate meeting. There were 6 missed calls from Nelson in a span of 3 minutes. I watched the status dashboard transition from yellow to solid red. Critical system failure. Thousands of freight trucks were effectively frozen at distribution centers across the country. The digital routing APIs were bouncing back error messages. At 8:15, Harvey's phone rang. It was the general counsel for Apex Logistics. Harvey put the call on speakerphone. The corporate lawyer sounded completely unhinged, accusing us of extortion and threatening to sue us into bankruptcy. Harvey calmly laughed into the phone, politely reminding him of the explicit provisions within 17 United States Code Section 106. He informed the frantic lawyer that they were willfully infringing RIN on a registered copyright, and every passing minute was exponentially increasing their legal liability. The lawyer abruptly hung up. I received a desperate call from Chloe, the young boot camp graduate. She was practically in tears, explaining that all the clients were screaming. Justin had locked himself in a server closet in sheer panic, and Nelson was throwing office supplies against the wall. I calmly informed her that I no longer worked there, and that this sounded exactly like a problem for the new systems architect who was being paid $180,000 a year to handle such issues. I hung up the phone and took a large bite of my eggs. At 9:30, Nelson called my personal cell phone from his private line. I answered on the fourth ring. He was screaming so loudly the audio was heavily distorted. He demanded I turn the system back on instantly, claiming they were losing tens of thousands of dollars every single minute. I spoke with a voice as smooth and cold as glacial ice. I reminded him that I had resigned and the license was revoked exactly as legally stipulated. I told him the system was simply obeying the law. He accused me of planting a malicious virus. I swiftly corrected his technological ignorance, explaining that it was a standard digital rights management protocol. I reminded him of Brenda's words, that I should accept the market rate or leave. I had chosen to leave, and this was the direct consequence of my departure. His aggressive tone suddenly shifted into desperate, slippery charm. He called me family and pleaded with me to come back, offering to match the new salary and pay me the $180,000. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. I told him it was no longer about the salary. That specific offer had completely expired, the moment Brenda dismissed my 14 years of loyalty. I informed him that this was now a hostile intellectual property acquisition. I stated clearly that they were utilizing my property without a valid license, a direct violation of federal copyright law. If he wanted the logistics platform to ever function again, he had to purchase the exclusive rights from me at the true market value. He stammered, asking if I meant a permanent buyout. I confirmed. I told him my lawyer would handle the negotiations and instructed him never to contact me directly again unless he wished to face severe harassment charges. I ended the call. My hands were completely steady. I looked over at Harvey, who was rapidly calculating numbers on a yellow legal pad. He estimated the catastrophic revenue loss, the massive reputation damage, and the impending breach of contract lawsuits from their major clients. Harvey looked up and stated that we should demand $4,500,000. It was a staggering amount of money, enough to completely secure my future. I asked if they would actually pay it. Harvey confidently smiled and replied that they had absolutely no other choice. They would either pay the ransom for the intellectual property or the entire company would bleed out and die before the weekend. The negotiation phase had officially begun. The waiting game was incredibly tense. Harvey and I relocated from the noisy diner to his pristine downtown office. We sat in a massive conference room overlooking the bustling city. The news of the outage had already leaked to several major technology blogs. Headlines speculated about massive cyber attacks or catastrophic insider sabotage. I continuously refreshed the system status dashboard on my laptop. It remained a solid, unforgiving red. Every single minute that passed meant massive financial hemorrhage for Apex Logistics. Shortly after 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was an unknown number from a different area code. Harvey nodded, silently confirming it was the board of directors. I answered the call. A sharp, commanding woman identified herself as Monica, the chairwoman of the board and the primary venture capital backer of the company. She did not waste any time with pleasantries. She bluntly stated that Nelson was a fool, but accused me of intentionally destroying a remarkably valuable corporate asset. I smoothly countered her accusation, firmly stating that the asset belonged entirely to me. I reminded her that Nelson had deemed my contributions worthless the previous day by refusing to pay me a fair market rate. She asked if this entire situation was truly over a denied salary increase. I clarified that it had initially started as a request for fair compensation, but it had rapidly evolved into a definitive matter of intellectual property ownership. I explained that I owned the engine, they were merely driving the car, and if they wanted the engine back, they had to pay the toll. Monica aggressively threatened to tie me up in grueling litigation for a decade, claiming they would bankrupt me with legal fees before I ever saw a single penny. I felt a massive surge of cold, unwavering confidence. I pointed out that the entire logistics system was currently offline. Their largest retail clients would terminate their contracts within hours if the freight trucks did not start moving. I asked her point blank if she could afford to wait years for a court ruling, or if she preferred to save her company today. The line went completely silent. She was a ruthless capitalist, and she knew the mathematical reality was entirely on my side. Server downtime destroys logistics companies in a matter of days, not years. Her voice grew significantly tighter as she admitted Nelson had severely mismanaged the situation and vastly underestimated my total value. She finally asked what it would take to turn the system back on immediately. I laid out the terms precisely as Harvey and I had discussed. I demanded a wire transfer of $4,500,000 for the complete and total transfer of all intellectual property rights related to the core architecture. She balked at the number, but I held firm. I also added one final non-negotiable condition. I demanded a formal public press release from Nelson personally admitting that the massive outage was due to a severe failure in executive management regarding intellectual property retention, completely clearing my name of any malicious hacking allegations. Monica sighed heavily, stating that such a public admission would be career suicide for Nelson. I coldly replied that he should probably start learning how to write basic code then. She told me to give her exactly 1 hour and abruptly hung up the phone. The countdown began. I stared out the window, watching the city traffic crawl along the highway, wondering if I had pushed them slightly too far. Harvey assured me they would capitulate. The cost of losing their major contracts far outweighed my demands. At precisely 3 minutes before 4 in the afternoon, an urgent email arrived from Monica. Attached was a comprehensive transfer agreement with the exact figure of $4,500,000 prominently displayed. It also included a draft of the press release, which contained a carefully worded admission of their administrative failure and completely exonerated me. It was not a tearful apology, but it was a legally binding victory. Harvey carefully reviewed the documents and gave me a decisive nod. We contacted the bank, and within 20 minutes, the massive wire transfer had fully cleared into my account. I was officially a millionaire. I opened my laptop, brought up the secure terminal, and typed in the administrative override commands. I executed a specific script that permanently bypassed the dead man's switch and transferred the core license keys to their internal servers. I watched the public status dashboard on my screen. The solid red bar flickered, turned yellow, and finally settled into a bright, vibrant green. System operational. The flow of data instantly resumed. The freight trucks could finally move again. I closed my laptop with a satisfying click. I looked at Harvey, thanked him for his brilliant legal maneuvering, and walked out of the office building. I stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, knowing I would never have to listen to the desperate wheeze of a failing server ever again. The market rate had finally been paid in full.